All right. So sissy squats are one of my favorite lower body calisthenics movements. It's a great strengthener for your quadriceps and for your knee, specifically your ACL, that joint just on the front of your knee, underneath your kneecap there. But you're definitely going to want to make sure you've done the work to stabilize your knees and strengthen your ACL before getting into these. This, for obvious reasons, puts a lot of strain on the knee. And a lot of people think that that's actually a bad thing. But assuming you have done that work prior to getting into this movement, these can be a phenomenal way to really bulletproof your knees and build knees of steel. Believe it or not, I've actually had several knee injuries throughout my life, and my knees were not nearly as strong as they are today. I had a lot of issues going on over the last few years, and I have corrected them through bodyweight training, working my way up to exercises like the sissy squat. Okay, so your basic sissy squat, you're going to start with your feet about hip distance apart, big toes pointed slightly out, just the exact same setup you would use for your basic squatting pattern. But what you're going to be focusing on doing is keeping your glutes squeezed and keeping your hips completely open. So think about squeezing your glutes at the top, actually pushing your hips forward slightly, and then bracing through the core so you're not going into a back bend. Okay, so brace the core, squeeze the glutes, dig your toes into the ground like you're gripping the floor with your toes. Bring your arms in front of you. I find it helps to create a fist, and then you're going to gaze at a point about 5 to 6 feet in front of you, or maybe even a little bit farther, and fix your gaze on that point, just as you would for any other posture or skill that requires a lot of balance. Okay, so gaze at that point, hips forward, glutes squeezed. And when you're ready, start sending the knees forward way in front of the toes. Hips have to stay open as you slowly lower down. Eventually, you'll be able to tap your knees to the floor and then use the strength of your quads to lift yourself back up. You have to be super active through the calves here as well to stabilize your ankles as you do this. Ankle mobility is definitely necessary for this, but stability is probably more important because the angle at your ankle actually doesn't change a whole lot. What does change is how much you have to extend the toes. So you'll notice that this is actually a pretty deep stretch through the bottoms of the feet, especially as you start to increase that range of motion. So if sissy squats are almost within your reach, but you're not quite there yet, you can't get your knees all the way down to the ground, or maybe you're just feeling like, okay, I don't think my knees are quite ready for this. Really simple solution is to reduce the range of motion by putting an object on the floor in front of you so that you're not bringing your knees all the way down. You might use a pillow or a couple pillows. You might have yoga blocks. You might just stack up some textbooks and use those as what you're dropping your knees to before coming back up. So reducing the range of motion is a very simple way to regress this exercise if you haven't gotten towards your full sissy squat yet. Alternatively, you can also just put your hand on a stable object. So I'll just use the side of my couch here and practice your sissy squats that way. And use that one hand to take the balance out of the equation, but you can also get a light push on that object to help yourself back up. Commonly, I've seen people use things like railings or a table or a chair to help themselves through their sissy squat. That's another way to regress the exercise. Whichever option you choose, and this applies to any thing you're practicing, any kind of movement or exercise, whichever way you're regressing or progressing an exercise, stick to that way for a while. So if you're going to, reduce the range of motion and hold an object to support yourself and then kind of progress by arbitrarily, increasing the range and sometimes using the object to help and sometimes not, or things like that, it's going to be hard to track your progress. Just like a scientist, change one variable at a time so you're ensuring you progress. Of course, If sissy squats are starting to get easy for you, if you're, quite strong in your quads and you've got super stable bulletproof knees, then you can actually do the opposite. So if you've got super strong and stable knees and you want to make your sissy squats harder, you can increase the range of motion by standing on an object that raises you off the floor so that you actually have to bring your knees down even farther. You can see that that's pretty tough even for me. Notice what I did with my arms there. So in your basic sissy squat, your arms stay forward. As you start to increase that range of motion, your arms are actually going to start to open up to the side or even back behind you to counterbalance yourself. Also, as you start to get your knees past parallel to the floor, you are going to have to start to go into a back bend, and that's another way that you progress from your basic sissy squat to a more advanced one. As always, I trust that you enjoyed the tutorial and wishing you well.